Love, Lost, Rebirth, Alive. Blue Dolphins. The novel. By Makāula Nakae. Chapter 4, Aumākua, Guardian Spirit Episode 17. Kiona Visionary. Coco climbed the weathered wooden stairs of the International Marketplace, a sprawling, maze-like landmark in the heart of Waikiki. Below her, the bustling energy of Kalakaua Avenue hummed, but as she ascended, the air grew cooler, filtered through the thick, sprawling canopy of the marketplace's giant banyan tree. The second floor was a quiet contrast to the tourist stalls below. Many of the old buildings remained vacant, their shadowed hallways leading to hidden corners like the nightclub Fresh. Tucked away in this elevated labyrinth was Jeremy's dance studio. Here, he balanced the commercial and the sacred, teaching everything from the modern melodic oana to the rigorous, ancestral kahiko. His troupe performed twice weekly in the adjacent plaza, a staple for tour groups and grand banquets. When Coco pushed open the small studio door, the scent of floor wax and tropical humidity greeted her. Jeremy and Hina were deep in conversation, surrounded by a handful of dancers stretching in the background. Aloha, Jeremy, Coco's voice echoed against the mirrors. The room turned as one. Hina was the first to move, rushing over with a bright smile to press a kiss to Coco's cheeks. She led her toward Jeremy, who struck a pose of exaggerated elegance. Aloha, Coco, or should I say, Miss Coco de L'Amour? My sweet, sweet lover, Jeremy greeted, his arms raised in a theatrical flourish. He did a slow, appreciative lap around her, his eyes missing nothing. It's been a while. You are as beautiful as ever. Where have you been hiding? Coco laughed, explaining that she hadn't been hiding, but rather traveling, years spent navigating the mainland and Europe before finally circling back to the islands. She admitted that the frantic pace of downtown Waikiki had lost its luster for her. After mentioning her recent return from New York, she turned the focus back to him, noting with genuine respect that he was still chasing his dream in the center of the city. Business is good, Jeremy said, his chest puffing out slightly. I'm producing shows everywhere, from traditional Polynesian reviews for the tourists to high-energy sets at the gay clubs. When exactly did you get back from New York? About 2 years ago, Coco replied, her gaze drifting down to the beautifully polished wood of the studio floor. A surface that had clearly felt the rhythmic beat of thousands of footsteps. Jeremy pulled Hina close, resting an arm around her waist as he prepared to introduce Coco to the rest of the troupe. Hina wants you to help with the choreography for the Volcano Party. Do you have any ideas? Jeremy asked Coco, his businesslike tone returning. Not yet. That's why I'm here, to absorb your vision first, she replied, her eyes scanning the studio. Hina stepped forward, her excitement palpable. She explained that she wanted to center the entire performance around the image of a volcano goddess. A volcano goddess? You want to be Madame Pele on stage? Coco asked. Her expression shifted, a slight serious weight settling into her gaze. The party's theme is celebrating fire, so the volcano goddess is perfect. Don't you agree? Hina smiled, looking to Jeremy for confirmation. Jeremy's mind was already racing with production value. He suggested collaborating with a Kumu hula teacher he knew who specialized in the rigorous, traditional kahiko style. If we layer in acrobatics and Polynesian fire dances, it will be spectacular. Imagine combining classical hula movements with the driving beat of modern techno music. Coco looked back at Hina, her hesitation clear. I think portraying Madame Pele might be challenging, she said, her voice tinged with doubt. Why are you hesitant? Jeremy asked, a bit baffled. I'm concerned about the legends, Coco replied. To Jeremy, this sounded like unnecessary superstition. That's nonsense. Pele is a legend, a story, Jeremy insisted. You don't need to be so sensitive. It's a dance performance. We aren't mocking her, we're honoring her. We're presenting our culture to the locals and tourists from all over the world. That's true. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Coco shrugged, though the feeling in her chest didn't dissipate. For Coco, the presence of Pele, the goddess of fire, lightning, wind, and volcanoes, was not something to be reduced to a costume or a stage cue. In Hawaiian belief, Pele is a living force, an ancestor whose mana, power, still flows through the lava tubes and craters. Even though Coco didn't have Hawaiian heritage, she lived in a world of resonance. To her, the sacred wasn't a concept, it was a vibration. She often felt an unseen presence, a heat that wasn't from the sun, which made the idea of performing as Pele feel dangerously close to a transgression. "So, what are you thinking?" Jeremy asked, his gaze fixed on Coco with a sharp, predatory curiosity. Then, turning to the dancers who were lingering in the background, he added with theatrical flair, "She's psychic, you know." "Jeremy!" Coco exclaimed, her eyes flashing with a sudden, sharp seriousness. He gave her a half-mocking sidelong glance, a smirk playing on his lips. "That's what everyone says," he shrugged. Coco felt the familiar prick of discomfort. She knew this game. People often reveal the secrets of others to elevate themselves, a subtle social maneuver to gain the upper hand by exposing something they don't fully understand. If a secret is brought into the light and something in the dynamic collapses, it gives the exposer a fleeting sense of satisfaction. She took a breath, letting the irritation pass. She had faced this skepticism and fascination countless times before. "I'm not that great of a psychic," she said, softening her tone into a joke. She explained that while she could sometimes sense the underlying currents of a person's spirit, it wasn't a dial she could simply turn at will. "It was unpredictable, but if you want me to try, I can. Just don't expect any guarantees," she said, looking straight into Jeremy's eyes. "If something comes to me, that's how it's meant to be. If nothing comes, then it wasn't necessary. It was just out of curiosity. You didn't need to take it so seriously," Jeremy said, shifting his weight, his bravado momentarily replaced by a flicker of embarrassment. "I understand. Everyone is curious, so don't worry," she said, her voice steady. "I'll try it. If something comes up, wouldn't that be interesting?" She gave him a small wink and lightly closed her eyes. Inside her mind, she navigated toward the window of consciousness that always appeared on the right side of her internal vision. It was an instant transition, a skill she had honed through years of intensive spiritual workshops. She didn't need the ritual of a chair or minutes of silence. She had learned to leap over the noise of distracting thoughts, landing directly in a clear, transparent realm of focus within seconds. This mental agility was a byproduct of her physical survival. The sheer intensity of the physical pain involved in intentionally recreating her body through surgery had forced her to master her own biology. She had learned biofeedback, the ability to harmonize her consciousness with her physical form. She had trained herself to raise or lower her body temperature and heart rate with the sheer power of her will. Most importantly, she had learned how to ease excruciating pain by manipulating her consciousness, turning her mind into a tool of internal calibration. Now, in the middle of the dance studio, she applied that same focus. The sounds of Waikiki faded. The scent of the dancer's sweat and the banyan tree vanished. She waited at the edge of that inner window, waiting to see what the celebrating fire theme would reveal to her about the goddess who claimed the islands as her own. Ordinary people navigating their everyday lives typically exhibit disorganized, less coherent beta brainwaves, the frequency of active, often scattered, external thought. At the same time, alpha waves serve as the gateway, the frequency of relaxation that leads to mental focus and altered states of consciousness. That pleasant drift just before sleep is the alpha state, while the deeper realm akin to REM, or dream-filled sleep, is the theta wave. In stark contrast to these frequencies of rest, gamma waves represent a remarkably awakened state of hyper-awareness and cognitive integration. Taking a deep breath, Coco performed a feat of internal alchemy. She connected her consciousness to every part of her body, consciously relaxing her physical form until she reached the deep, heavy resonance of theta. Simultaneously, she funneled that preserved energy upward, elevating the activity in her head to the lightning-fast frequency of gamma. By minimizing the energy consumption of her body's sensory organs, she redirected her entire vital force to her mind. As her unconscious sensory inputs were organized and minimized, they paradoxically became hypersensitive. The pulses running through the synapses across her brain awakened, creating a state of high-functioning stillness. She subtly adjusted her gaze, keeping her eyes slightly wider than usual. She intentionally shifted her focus away from the mirrored walls of the studio, concentrating instead on the abstract images beginning to float in her mind's eye. The scenery in front of her blurred. The wide field of vision that encompassed Jeremy, Hina, and the dancers narrowed instantly into a tunnel. She had successfully shifted her viewpoint from the world seen with her naked eyes to the one perceived through the lens of her inner consciousness. Deep within that tunnel, a flicker of heat began to rise, not the clinical heat of the studio's humidity, but a raw, ancient orange. It wasn't just a dance theme anymore. The fire was beginning to take shape. As Coco deepened her focus, the window of consciousness on the right side of her mind began to pulse with color. It started as a bruised cobalt blue, bleeding into vague, shifting patterns of white and turquoise. But the resolution was low, like a camera lens struggling to find its mark. "I see some blue scenery. Hold on, maybe it will become clearer in a bit," she whispered, her voice sounding far away even to herself. She took a measured breath and closed her eyes again, resetting her internal alignment. This time, as she reopened them, she didn't just look. She adjusted her focal length. A slight sharp tingling began to radiate from the center of her forehead, the space corresponding to the pineal gland or the mystical third eye. The sensation intensified, transforming from a prickle into a heavy, swirling vibration. It felt as if a physical organ were spinning, recalibrating its frequency to tune into a broadcast that existed just beyond the visible spectrum. As the vibration hit a resonance frequency, the interference cleared. The blurry blue image sharpened into high definition. The turquoise patterns resolved into undulating waves, rising and falling with a slow, hypnotic three-dimensionality. This wasn't a static picture, it was a living environment. Coco felt the sudden, phantom sensation of humidity clinging to her skin. She could almost smell the salt and hear the low whistle of the wind as it whipped across the deep water. This wasn't the shallow, reef-bound water of Waikiki. This was the open sea, the vast, deep cobalt of the mid-Pacific, where the currents are strong and the depths are bottomless. Then, emerging from the spray and the glare of the sun, a shape began to manifest. A canoe. It cut through the waves with a purposeful rhythm, a solitary vessel in the center of an infinite blue world. It wasn't the fire she had expected to see, but something older, moving across the water toward a destination only the navigator knew. "I see a canoe. It looks like an outrigger canoe." Coco's voice was rhythmic, almost a chant. Behind her eyelids, the details sharpened. The wooden hulls were bound tightly with fiber ropes, some of which angled upward to a sail that billowed like a white cloud against the cobalt sky. Beneath the prow, white spray exploded in slow motion before vanishing into the deep. "But I see two heads at the front. It's a catamaran," she corrected herself, her head tilting slightly as the perspective shifted. It was a double-hulled canoe, a massive vessel of ancient design. "I see it clearly now. It's a large voyaging canoe, like the Hakulia. A thin rope attached to the prow whipped in the gale." The vessel was a masterpiece of ancient engineering, riding the swells and cutting through the wind over the infinite blue expanse. Suddenly, a command that felt older than the ocean itself surfaced in her mind, bypassing her own thoughts. "Move forward and rise higher." As she obeyed the internal command, her vision underwent a violent expansion. The peephole through which she had been watching shattered, replaced by a panoramic, cinematic view that seemed to wrap around her entire consciousness. Her viewpoint soared into the sky. Below, the ancient canoe looked like a small, determined needle stitching through a tapestry of white foam and navy blue. The white sail fluttered, turning 30 degrees clockwise as the navigators caught a shifting trade wind. For a fleeting second, she saw the figures of people standing on the hull, their eyes fixed on the distance. When she projected her awareness toward their destination, a faint, jagged silhouette of land appeared on the horizon, shimmering through the heat haze. Again, the words surfaced. Havaiki. In the quiet of her soul, she wondered if this was the ancient name for Hawaii, or perhaps the ancestral homeland from which all Polynesians began their journey. Jeremy and Hina stood frozen in the studio. The air in the room had grown strangely cold despite the afternoon sun. Listening to Coco's unwavering tone and seeing her statue-like expression, they felt a primal chill. "Oh my God," Jeremy whispered, his voice cracking as he rubbed his arms. "That's the same image I had in mind, exactly the same." "What?" Coco gasped, her eyes snapping open. The connection to the window of consciousness shattered instantly, the vibrant cobalt sea dissolving back into the mirrored walls of the dance studio. She felt slightly dazed, her lungs pulling in shallow gulps of air as if she had truly been miles out at sea. "Oh, I'm sorry. I interrupted your reading," Jeremy said, his voice unusually soft. He looked at her with a mix of awe and validation. "I was already thinking of this. We can't exactly borrow the Hakulia from a museum, so I've been planning to bring a smaller outrigger onto the stage. I'll use lasers and dry ice to create the ocean, with dancers in traditional attire chanting voyage songs. A full hula kahiko performance to depict the migration. Incorporating kahiko." "That's brilliant!" Hina exclaimed, her voice hushed with excitement. Jeremy crossed his arms, then unfolded them to pull Coco into a tight hug. "Unbelievable, Coco, you really saw it. The islands of Hawaii are a tapestry of arrivals. While many locals carry the ancestral blood of Tahiti, Tonga, and the Marquesas, the society was built by successive waves of immigrants from the West and the East, Japan, China, Portugal, and the Philippines. Each group brought their own canoe plant staro, sweet potato, and medicinal herbs, relying on the stars and the wind to find this speck of land in the vast blue. Our ancestors crossed this ocean on double-hulled canoes around 600 AD, Jeremy said, his pride evident. Though he was half Caucasian, his Samoan and Portuguese roots ran deep. He held Coco's waist, looking intently into her eyes. "Honey, thank you for proving my idea was correct. Your vision was the answer. We're going to honor them." These ancient navigators traveled without compasses or charts, guided instead by the stars, the flight of birds, and the whispers of their Aumākua, ancestral spirits. To bring this onto a nightclub stage wasn't just entertainment. For Jeremy, it was a tribute to the bloodline that survived the deep. "Many locals at the party have Micronesian and Polynesian blood," Jeremy continued passionately. "They'll be moved by this." "You're welcome," Coco replied, forcing a smile. But internally, her mind was racing. What were those words that surfaced in my mind? Move forward and rise higher. Havaiki. It didn't feel like a memory or the voice of a guide she recognized. It was a resonant, unfamiliar frequency. Was it an ancestor of Jeremy's reaching out? Or was the land itself speaking through her? "Incorporating the voyage feels right," she told him, though the echo of that unfamiliar voice still vibrated in the back of her mind. "I'm sure everything will go well." To be continued. Swim and listen to the historical gay drama in the center of the Pacific. We are releasing a brand new episode every single day until the epic conclusion of the story. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 15 to 45-minute hit of cinematic historical drama set in the tropical islands of Hawaii, the perfect daily plunge into the shattered world a millennium after 9/11. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full novel now. Bookmark Blue Dolphins. The Novel Playlist, A Great Argead Saga, Alexine, Volume 1, Talesius Playlist, Volume 2, Sacred Band Playlist, and divine oracle. Unwritten words behind my novel playlist. Subscribe to follow the waves and currents of forbidden paradise love tales. Comment below.